Chapter 4 Wild Dog. Otak went first because he had the spear. He cast about for the direction of the whimpering. It was blown on the wind and hard to place, and for a long time it stopped altogether. Then they both heard it again, near at hand, coming from some rocks just ahead of them. Maroo squinted against the bright light bouncing off the snow. Otak was a dark moving blur. It hurt her eyes to look at him. He moved cautiously. She saw him stop and signaled to her to come. He was leaning on a low rock. They both peered over it. On the far side lay a wild she-dog, dead. Her flank was ripped open. Beside her, a puppy with an injured foreleg whimpering pathetically, and nuzzled at her teats. The prince of the dog pack led away from the two, in their patch of blood-trampled snow. The puppy saw the children and cringed, snarling, its yellow eyes dilated with fear, but it could not move. They saw that it would soon die, if not from cold or hunger, then from attacks by eagles or other carnivores. Maroo wondered what had happened. Perhaps the mother had died defending her pup. She crept softly toward the puppy, followed by Otak. The puppy tried to scramble away, holding up his leg, but collapsed, panting. It growled fearlessly. The children whispered together, "What killed her? Maybe a bear. But she looks as if she might have been gored. The puppy would die if we leave it. It might die anyway without his mother. No, it must have been weaned." They both fell silent, thinking. Maroo said, "Perhaps we could take it back to the camp." She had put the thoughts of both of them into words. The grown-ups would be angry, Otak said. "They'll tell us to drive it away." Maroo guessed he was right. After all, what was a dog? Dogs were rivals of people, and a sick one would take precious food. Yet, she knew that people had sometimes tamed dogs. There was the man from the Blue Lake tribe who had one. She had seen it at the autumn gathering last year, wearing a leather collar. The man took the dog with him when he went hunting. Many people thought the man crazy to give food and shelter to a dog, but Maroo had noticed how the dog loved the man and watched for him, and rushed joyfully to meet him when he had been away. Tentatively, she put out a hand to stroke the puppy. It showed its gums and snarled with yellow pointed teeth. She dared not touch the injured leg. "I think I could bandage it," she said, "but he won't let me." Otak rummaged in the bag hanging from his belt and brought out the leather mittens he wore in cold weather. "I could hold him," he said. "He'll bite through those. Let me try." Maroo looked into her own bag. She carried strips of soft leather for binding wounds. To clean the wound, she melted some snow in her hand. "Now," she said. Otak got behind the puppy. He put one arm around his body and held his head with the other mittened hand, leaving the forepaw dangling. The puppy struggled fiercely, and Otak nearly lost his grip. "He's strong!" he exclaimed. "Can you hold him?" "I think so." Otak held on, wincing as the puppy's teeth pierced his mittens, while Maroo gently cleansed the bloody wound. She had to force herself to tend the leg. The pain was so great that the puppy's whole body jerked at every touch, and she hated the feeling that she was hurting him. Otak was restraining the dog bravely. Quickly, she began binding the wound. When it was done, she knotted another strip of hide and made a collar with a lead. She slipped the collar over the dog's head, and his eyes rolled in terror. She freed his muzzle from Otak's hand and twisted it around, trying to bite off the strange thing. "I wish we had some food for him," said Maroo. "There's meat at the camp." "But will they let him eat?" "We can't leave him now." "No!" Maroo put on her own mittens, and they took turns carrying the fierce little creature back to the woodland. With difficulty they began climbing down the steep hillside. Maroo took the dog, winding the lead several times around her wrist and holding on grimly. Otak went down quickly on his own, and she heard his high-pitched voice describing to the others what had happened, and the disapproving, low tones of the women. When Maroo arrived, clutching the dog, the two women were already telling Otak that he could not keep it. Maroo talked about the man from the Blue Lake tribe, but Old Mother was not impressed. Perhaps in the caves, in the winter, it might be possible, she conceded. But not now, when we are on the move. Maroo seized on that. Perhaps. He'll soon learn to run again, she said. He could stay with us and help us hunt, and follow us when we go back to the caves. Old Mother sighed and shook her head, but Tekek said, Put him down, Maroo. See if he can walk. Maroo set the puppy down gently. He ran a little way, with the bad leg held stiffly off the ground, but soon stopped and began his high-pitched whimpering. The leg will mend, Tekek said. Maroo has bandaged it well. And he's just a puppy, Otak agreed eagerly. He'll be easy to tame. Tekek squatted down and held out her hand and called softly to the dog. He stared with wild eyes, but did not try to move away. He's hungry, Maroo said, turning pleading eyes on Old Mother. There is plenty of food in summer, Tekek admitted. Maroo saw that she now had her mother on her side and felt hopeful. Tekek was submissive, content to be led by the old woman and the men. But when she truly wanted something, she usually got her way. Can't we try to tame him, Maroo begged, and Otak and Nimei joined in. Please, can we try? I don't know what the men will say, Old Mother said, shaking her head. The children jumped with glee. Take him back to the camp. Oreg can decide. Maroo was jubilant. She knew that Oreg would be guided by Old Mother. And Old Mother had half-heartedly agreed. Of course, the elders might object, but the family would not come under their leadership again until the autumn, and by that time surely the dog would be tame. When they returned to the camp, the first thing they noticed was the hut, almost finished. The men had cut willow branches, which they had set into the base, bending them over and crisscrossing them to make a low dome building. Smaller branches had been woven in and out between the main stems. They saw the men sitting on stones by the stream. Their barbed harpoons and several large salmon lay beside them. Otak ran to his father, exclaiming in disappointment, I wanted to fish! Why didn't you wait for me? Oreg mimicked Otak's sulky face. Another time, little hunter. Before Otak could protest, Maroo was there with the puppy. Both men jumped up. What's this? Everyone began explaining at once. Can we keep it? The children begged. Vorka looked at Oreg anxiously. He will eat a lot. And what will the elders say? Oreg shrugged. He was trying to touch the puppy in Maroo's arms, but the sharp teeth snapped at him. Maroo could see that her father was fascinated. The puppy growled. Oreg growled back. The puppy barked furiously. Don't, said Maroo. You're making him cross. Oreg laughed. He's a fierce one. Can he stay? Yes, said Oreg. He can stay. The children shouted their happiness. And now, said Old Mother, we must finish the hut before we eat. It will soon be dark. Put the puppy down, Maroo, and fetch the hides. Maroo tied the puppy's lead to a tree. They all helped and stretched hides across the willow framework of the hut and tie them in place. Soon it was done. The men fetched big stones and used them to wedge the base firmly. The small round house crouched under the rock wall, too low to be battered by the wind. Old Mother lit the fire while Tekek gutted the fish and prepared vegetables. Maroo brought water to the puppy in a bone bowl and begged a bit of raw deer meat from her mother. She chopped the meat small, and the puppy ate ravenously. The children stood around watching him. He snarled at them, his eyes frightening with fear. Come away! You make him afraid, Old Mother said. But the children were unable to stay far away until the fish was cooked, and Tekek called them to come to eat. When they went to look at him after the meal, the puppy was asleep. Now leave him and let his wound mend, said Old Mother firmly, as all three crouched beside the puppy, and Nimei tentatively stroked his head. Maroo seized her advantage. Tell us a story, Old Mother. The young children immediately began to clamor for a story too, and even A Rag and Vorka joined in. Everyone loved a story, so as the night deepened and the stars came up cold and bright, they huddled close together around the fire and listened. Maroo's gaze was fixed on Old Mother's face as she began. Old Mother was very old, her skin like soft, creased leather, her cheeks collapsed inward over teeth that were worn flat from chewing hides to soften them. Only her eyes were still young, not filmy like some of the old men's, but dark and bright as a knife. The story she told was about the time when the gods walked the earth. Even the Great Mother, Oma, had given birth to the lesser gods on the great ice. Last of all had come Ptarmigan, and she was the cleverest of all the gods. There were many tales of her cunning, and Old Mother told one that they had all heard many times before, how Ptarmigan outwitted Wolverine. Maroo was pleased. She loved these stories because her own name meant Little Ptarmigan. When the story was over, the children went to look at the puppy. It was still asleep, but his legs were twitching. "He's chasing the dream here," Old Mother said.